Hi, welcome to Youth Have Thoughts 2, the key to effective youth discussion. Thank you so much for joining us. This session is a part of Be the Change Youth Training Program. All week, we have been hosting a series of meetings created by youth and for youth to grow in their leadership, advocacy, and facilitation skills. Be the Change Youth Training Program is an annual opportunity for youth ages 14 to 22 to connect with like-minded peers from around the country who are passionate leaders of change in their health centers, schools, and communities. During the program, participants learn about and discuss health and education topics, develop advocacy and leadership skills, and have fun through interactive team building activities. The goal of Be the Change is to support youth to recognize, enhance, and apply their talents and skills as influential ethical leaders of youth-led school-based health promotion. Designed and facilitated by SBHA's Youth Advisory Council, this virtual training program is for youth by youth. We are excited to offer this one session to youth and adults so that we can grow and learn together. Since this is a meeting, please feel free to have your video turned on and unmute during the questions and discussion portions. We will also be using Menti. Please use another device and go to menti.com and use the code 203-2732367. So these are the objectives that we are going to talk about today. Part one is why youth have thoughts too. This is kind of like, why did we decide to do it and what brought about the idea. Part two is the experience, just what us as council members learned and how we were able to engage with the students. And part three is the results, which is what we saw as a result of having youth have thoughts too. So today, this is our overview. Youth Have Thoughts 2 is an interactive sharing experience created by the School-Based Health Alliance Youth Advisory Council to connect with youth and young adults across the nation about various topics and issues presently occurring. So when we created Youth Have Thoughts 2, we wanted a numerous amount of students across the nation to be able to attend. So as you can see on this map, we had 128 participants. We had them all away from the East Coast to the West Coast, and it really brought about numerous different perspectives, including DC, which is awesome. So why did we start Youth Have Thoughts 2? We started Youth Have Thoughts 2 because as council members, we realized that there were a lot of students across the nation who really were seeking a sense of connection that they weren't getting during the COVID-19 pandemic. And so through Youth Have Thoughts 2, we were able to gain different perspectives, as I previously mentioned, because we had various individuals from different states who were experiencing different things. Not only that, but it created a sense of accountability so that students were able to share their thoughts and we were able to kind of help lead them and guide them in how they were feeling and what they were doing. And as you can see on this Menti screen, we had several different responses about what are your thoughts on the COVID-19 vaccine, and furthermore showing different perspectives based off of states and creating a sense of connection through everyone's different opinion. And in addition, so our Youth Have Thoughts too, every time we have safe space rules. We ask for consent from a parent or guardian for teens under 18. We do not record because no recording opens up more opportunity for students to speak and really share that they might not do if they knew that we were recording them. And we also advise everyone to respect other people's opinions because we very much want it to be kind of talking like friends and not necessarily like adults. And so we put these rules in active every single time we have a Youth Have Thoughts too. So we each have different roles for our Youth Have Thoughts too as council members. Bilo will touch more on these later in the presentation, but we have introduction facilitators who essentially, they kind of introduce Menti and kind of we play a game. really opening up the safe space. And then we have core facilitators who they are more in charge of running the meeting and sparking the conversation. And then we have chat facilitators because some students might not feel like sharing with unmuting, so we offer them the chat option as well. So when we created Youth Have Thoughts 2, we kind of sat down and thought about all of the different youth events and events that were happening in the nation. And so as you can see on this timeline, we had COVID-19 began and the murder of Breonna Taylor in March 2020. And then furthermore, we progressed to the murder of George Floyd and Black Lives Matter protests increased. And so all of these things were happening. And often youth didn't have a place where they could share how they were feeling about this, which is why the first Youth Have Thoughts 2 happened in June 2020. At this time, we were able to really talk about each one of these events and how that was affecting the teens and what they wanted to do about it and advocacy efforts and other things like that. And then we had our second Youth Have Thoughts 2 for teens who might not have been able to come in June, still talking about those same issues. And then this next year, the previous year, COVID-19 vaccines were introduced in January and May. And so we kind of felt that it was important to follow up talking about racial justice, school and home life, community, civic engagement, all while we were still at home during the pandemic and vaccines were being introduced. So now, if you just joined today during our presentation, we're going to be using Menti, and the code is at the top. It's 2032737. And the question is, what is one current issue or hot topic youth would like to discuss during a Youth Have Thoughts 2 session? These are all good. Access to comprehensive sexual education in schools, how to keep youth engaged in the council. These are all really great answers. Feel free to unmute if you would like to share more about the issues and hot topics that you posted on Menti. Maybe just talking about why you feel like that is important.
Hi, Brooklyn.
Hi.
My name's Riley Keenan. How are you?
Good. How are you?
This is amazing. I mean, you should all be very proud of yourself, first of all, because it is super important to, be there for each other, especially during COVID. So I just wanted to discuss one hot topic that I'm personally involved with and professionally involved with, and that is how to better support the LGBTQ plus community, providing supports for them. I actually am a Kaleidoscope advocate. We have a virtual group going on right now, and it's basically all over the state of New Jersey, and we have one youth participant from upstate New York. So if anyone is looking for support for the LGBT plus community, the age range is 13 to 18. I will put my contact information in the chat, but that's a topic that I think is, it's been very much needed to be at forefront, but it seems like it is now, at least within the last few months, been very much upfront. And smaller towns in New Jersey have actually had their first gay pride events, and it's been amazing. So that was what I wanted to contribute to this question.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. That is very important. I'm glad that you are taking action in that.
Hello, Miss Lady.
Hi.
Hello.
I would say advocacy in the doctor's office and the healing power of creativity mediums. I would say since we're promoting our own initiatives, which I absolutely applaud. Whoever was speaking prior, I didn't catch his name. Mr. Riley. Yes, I applaud.
Yes, that was me. Thank you.
Yes, but I applaud what you're doing. And personally, in the summer of 2020 and going on to the summer of 2021, I've been having a StreamYard live event series that's been talking about just this, but just ranging from the topical subjects that stem from mental health exactly. So just the healing power of art and the our fashion choices and how that impacts us psychologically, to advocacy, like I said, in our doctor's appointments as teens, transitioning to adult care. We had the support of the Children's Neurology Foundation with Dr. Jessica Nickrand, who actually suggested I participated in this, which I absolutely love it already. And just this year, we were able to talk with Lewis and Clark College professor Ben Gaskins, talk about voter suppression and how that impacts minorities' mental health, along with, I believe it was Linda K. Klein, to talk about purity culture. So just, I saw you had that recently on the board, the comprehensive sexual education in schools, because that's definitely something that's not being put as a priority. But we're gradually getting there with mental health, because I see in schools that we're talking more about like suicide risks and how to educate your peers and reach out to your supportive network if you were to see a friend or even yourself get to that point. So yes, I'm sorry, I'm like going all over the place, but just those issues and all, and having these types of sessions address those wide-ranging topics would be much appreciated. So yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing. So we had some other responses added. All of these are very important. Now we are going to be passing it off to Byla to talk about formulating questions.
All right, thank you, Brooklyn. So this section of developing your session is very important, because this is where you are going to identify your purpose, as this is going to outline the entirety of the session itself. So it's very important to get clear on your purpose, on your goal. What are you trying to get out of it? What information are you trying to get out of it? And this is all going to be done through a facilitation guide. You can see it on the screen here. This is just an example that our council members recently used for one of our Youth Have Thoughts 2 sessions. And you can see that they chose 2 to 3 relevant topics, academic transitions and also life transitions here. And then you want to go ahead and break down these topics to related projects or activities, or just general questions and things that you want to get from youth. And where Menti comes in, as you saw, we already used that just to make the presentation more interactive, but this is also going to help you get more specific with the questions that you're asking, and in terms of, okay, what do you want to get out of this question? So again, as you can see, they broke down, for example, question 1, how would you define the word or concept transition? And then they used the Menti open text box response, because that makes sense for that particular question and for the goal of that question. But we're going to be moving more specifically into Menti, just to give you guys an idea of how to better incorporate this into your sessions. So here are just examples of types of responses that Menti has. It's a really great feature, again, to make it more interactive and to move away from a presentation type of feel, but more of a conversation. So you can see we have a word cloud, the sliders, and then also the yes or no polls. Again, these are all going to have different goals depending on the question and depending on what it is you want to ultimately get from this. Which you will see more in the next slide what I mean by that. So for the pick the answers, this is a great feature to use if you want to see their opinions on different types of topics. The yes or no polls are really great for clear and straight to the point answers. And the word cloud, my favorite, are really great for finding common themes and trends. So it's cool because the word that comes up more frequently is the one that's going to get larger and larger. So you can kind of see common trends within your youth and within your sessions. And again, Menti is just great overall because it can be used periodically to keep the audience engaged, and it's lead to really, really great discussion. And it's also anonymous, so nobody's going to know who said what, which is really great to contribute to that safe space that Brooklyn mentioned in the beginning. Now, in the next section, this is arguably one of the most important parts because you want to get people to come to your sessions. Marketing could be its whole presentation on its own, but you really want to promote your session, and you want to promote it using the power of social media, because we know that social media is very prevalent within youth. And again, 90% of teens use social media. You can see on the left here that we used, this is from our social media, from the Youth Council, and we use trending topics and things that are going on to generate content. And based on topic that is trending, youth are more likely to engage on what's trending and what's going around. So for example, when the Stop Asian Hate movement was really going around, we would create content on that just for education, but also because it was something that was, of course, always relevant, but at the time it was a really huge thing. And again, it brings more content to create. And then you also want to advertise on large platforms that youth follow, which is really important because this is how you're going to get youth from different organizations. So for example, this Instagram account, Generations, they have a large following where they talk about trending topics, they talk about things in the news and the media, and the youth that follow them are youth that are likely to engage in conversations. They're very interested in advocacy, and these are the types of people that you ultimately want to come to your sessions and provide and contribute to your session. So marketing definitely is very, very important, and we again use the power of social media to market and to have turnouts within our sessions. So after marketing and kind of planning that out, it's also important to establish the roles. Brooklyn mentioned just briefly the 3 major roles within a session. So the introduction facilitator is the one that creates the initial space for you. So it's very, very important that they are warm and welcoming. Just to, reiterate that safe space is very important. And the energy that someone brings in initially is going to set the stage for the rest of the presentation. The core facilitator is a person that drives a conversation and they lead the discussion. They're the backbone for the session, essentially. And then the chat just ensures that every voice is heard, because sometimes not everyone is going to shout out their opinion. They're going to put it in the chat just because they may not be as comfortable. And monitoring the chat, having someone to monitor that is very beneficial, so that again, any questions, comments, and opinions are also shared. And we just want to reiterate that this is made by youth for youth, and there's just that adult support, but ultimately it's very much youth-centered and youth-led. Now, within our roles, we had some successes and challenges that you will see in the next slide here, because it's not always perfect, but we've definitely learned a lot within our roles. So on the right, on the left, sorry, these are the things that you can see as our successes, and then on the right we have our challenges. So creating a safe space was definitely something that we really valued, and we did a good thing out again with the ground rules. But at the same time, there was a challenge between finding the balance between being vulnerable and then oversharing, because we don't want to be on 2 ends of the extremes. And then we also did really, really great with having easy flowing conversations and making it more of a conversation and not a presentation, where people really were comfortable sharing what it is that they wanted to. It was very easy flowing, and we would build off of things that others would say. Now, the challenge here is that because so many people were passionate about the things that they were saying, we had to constantly redirect the conversation so we didn't go off track. And of course, Interestingly enough, the smaller groups actually had better results, and we believe this was because of the level of comfort that smaller groups bring rather than larger groups. So the challenge here really just means that small groups aren't necessarily a bad turnout if you don't have a lot of people coming to your sessions. We find that there's more meaningful conversations within small groups rather than larger groups. And of course, the success with the relevant topics, finding things that are trending, things that are going on in the world, things that are really affecting youth right now. And then the challenge here was formulating the right questions based on those topics, because it's very important to, again, identify that goal and that purpose for your question so that you get the answers that you're looking for. Okay, so within the rules here of what we learned, I'm going to turn it over to Brooklyn so she can kind of highlight what she learned, and then I'll go in with my experience.
Thank you, Byla. So I learned 3 major things when doing our Youth Have Thoughts Too. I learned valuable leadership skills. So I'm very outgoing in person, but not as much to volunteer online. And during our first and second Youth Have Thoughts Too, I was challenged to do the introduction section. And I didn't want to do it at first, but after I did it, I'm so glad. Like, I learned so much, and now I'm here doing this. So Youth Have Thoughts Too is a great way to have different teens step up into different roles that can lead them to go even lead their own meeting like this one. I also learned management of virtual training. It can be difficult to screen share and use Zoom and try and keep up with the chats. And so Youth Have Thoughts Too also taught me valuable virtual training skills that I not only can use in other meetings, but also in college and other aspects. And then it taught me a new understanding for other people. I think a lot of times we get in our heads and we only have one certain opinion, but being able to talk about all of these prominent issues with other students from around the country really just opened my eyes to everyone else is experiencing something different. And so I was able to gain a new understanding for others. So now Byla can share about what she learned.
So similar to Brooklyn, I've definitely learned a lot when it comes to facilitation and understanding what goes into properly facilitating a session so people feel comfortable enough to share. And again, that ties into the safe space. And I've said that many times already, but that's very, very important in terms of the turnout, in terms of how people are going to share and what they're going to share. And lastly, I really learned how to keep discussions flowing. So building off of what other people have said to lead into different conversations and tying everything together. Again, it makes things feel more natural and not as forced. So it's definitely had its benefits for Brooklyn and I. But looking overall into the benefits of youth-led initiatives in the next slide here, you'll see that it encourages leadership and initiative. So allowing you to practice being in leadership roles, it gives them beneficial traits, not just for, facilitation purposes, but other areas of life where initiative and leadership is very important to have. So also this creates passion, purpose, and drive, which are very important whenever you're undertaking anything. It's important to have that passion and purpose. So with this, it helps you to have the freedom to support and also explore their passions and interests while they're actually making a difference and also collaborating with one another, which leads me into my next point where this connects youth to like-minded individuals. So this role helps to ensure that every voice is heard and every voice is valued. So this is where they can realize that there's bigger things in themselves and there's bigger things around them, and that they can all work together to achieve a common goal. Okay. Now, this is also a crucial point when it comes to collecting data for and from your sessions. Diversity. So with the more representation you have, the more applicable the data is, but also the more likely people are to engage. So we just have 3 R's here: realistic, relatable, and reproducible. You want to make sure your sessions are all of these things. So in terms of realistic, every youth comes with their different experience and backgrounds to shape their ideas. Relatable, the more youth relate, the more likely they are to engage, like I said. And of course, reproducible. By encouraging a diverse group, you can apply the data collected to solve issues for all types of youth populations. So again, it makes it more more able to reproduce outside of your session itself, because you have a diverse group, and it's logical to assume that the information collected within that diverse group can be applicable to other groups, other youth populations. And now, so we've talked all about our session and building it, but how can this help you and your youth within your centers and also your life in general? So let's just get the facts for replicating things. So these are just things to consider. This is some information we collected from one of our sessions, and I think this is important information. What do you want to see in your communities is what we asked them. And a lot of youth looked for education and teaching, learning, and having more resources. So the green one here says working with staff who work with youth and educating them on better to serve youth, educate the youth about the power they hold and how to use it, make sure people are being seen as people, not just as protesters or an officer. That was just back within the movement. Again, teach young kids about the importance of being kind to everyone. So again, a lot of this is centered around education. So it seems like a lot of youth they want more outreach, they want more education, and they want more resources to speak about and also advocate for things that are important to them and things that apply to them. So here you can see just things to overall consider if you are going to replicate this. The power of social media and branding. I already mentioned marketing before, just because marketing is a very crucial point. You know, you want people to come to your sessions, you want to have that turnout, but branding. So branding matters. We came up with a fun name, Youth Have Thoughts Too, as a response to the need for young people to connect with peers, just as health providers and professionals did at the start of the pandemic. So while we changed the tagline to personalize the event, we kept the same name to show the connection and build a brand that youth will recognize. So just finding a slogan or a nice little name for your session and then constantly using that will also build awareness for that. So secondly, provide a platform for youth to share their voices. Again, this just ties into creating that safe space and that point where youth can feel that level of comfort so they feel like their voices matters and that it has impact. Identify your center as a resource. This is very important because you can even say it literally, because without saying this or without identifying yourself as a resource, people don't really know where to go. So just simply stating that you are a resource, that you are open for youth, you are available. And then also communicate in a way that youth understand and relate to. This is where kind of like the diversity comes into, with just relatability. And then also, this is also very important, allow ample time to plan a session. So for us, we started 1 to 2 months prior with scheduled meetings and just going through the outline and the marketing. All of those things really take time, and establishing roles. So it's definitely something that should be planned prior to the session, when you want your session to be. So you also want to take into consideration things that are going on around that time frame. All right. So overall, these are just the key takeaways that you should take away from this presentation. Any youth-centered event, including experiences like Youth Have Thoughts Too, is really a space where youth can express themselves openly and freely. And again, this is just their opportunity to share their ideas on topics that impact them and topics that they have an impact on. It can be really, really amazing to take this information from youth, because a lot of times it's their first time having that safe space where they're with other youth talking about topics that impact them. So we just kind of split it up into 3 different parts here: prepare, implement, and then results action. So preparation falls under the marketing and the encouraging diversity and inclusion. Implementation is about formulating the questions, creating that facilitation guide, working with mentee, and also identifying and establishing the roles. And then with the results / action, this is where you're going to essentially use the data to create change and figure out what works for your session and what doesn't, so that you can create more impactful sessions in the future. So in this next part here, we just have a Q&A for you guys. So thank you all for attending this session, for your time and for your attention. And I'm going to turn it over to Brooklyn for this Q&A.
Thank you, Viola. So we kind of wanted to just have an open platform where we can talk about these different questions and y'all will all have a chance to share. So the first question is, what excites you about hosting your own youth-centered discussion? And if you want to share, feel free to unmute or type in the chat.
Hi, if you guys don't mind, I have a question to throw out there. So my name is Maria. I work with a pediatric health system in Wisconsin, and we have been talking about trying to do a youth focus group as a part of our community health needs assessment. And I hadn't before considered the idea of having the youth facilitate the focus group. So I really get excited about thinking about youth leading the discussion that engages youth. I think it'll just be so much richer that way. So thank you for all that you shared.
Yes. So in the chat, we have several answers. Valuable youth feedback for specific programs, to have the youth speak for themselves regarding what their needs are. All of these are great answers. Thank you guys for sharing. That is definitely what the goal of youth-centered discussion is trying to get youth opinions and everything else. So that's awesome. So moving on, our second question is, what might prevent you from integrating this type of event into your school, health center, or organization? So like, what might be something that you're nervous about doing, or something that you might have to avoid the obstacle, stuff like that? So I see finding a time for everyone to participate. We're mostly remote right now. Yes, that can be hard. Would anyone like to share out loud what they put in the chat about anything?
Hi, I'm not sure if you could hear me.
Yes, I can.
So one of the things, so I was the one that wrote about the remote part. So that's what I'm struggling with is being that, especially I'm in California, so a lot of our students were remote, and now they're going to be going to in-person in the fall. And what would be the appeal of doing something like this if my organization is only allowing remote sessions? So I guess that's what my struggle is.
I would say, just from like our personal experience with Youth Have Thoughts Too, because we really did incorporate a variety of people and like really made sure that we were accommodating different time zones. I would say that even though it's online, youth still feel open to sharing. Like, don't let that Zoom link be the thing that keeps you from doing it, because we still have, even though we were only on Zoom. And so I think that there's still valuable discussion to be had, even though it can't be in person. And like, I know that even as with our council, we're all virtual because we're all in different states, and we like schedule a bi-weekly time to meet with each other. So just really trying to accommodate everyone and making that open, safe space.
Yeah, and I also think that having it online is actually beneficial just because you can incorporate different types of people and different people from different time zones, so they don't have to physically be there. But we use like, I know there's different platforms or services where you can input all of your time zones to find a common time where everyone is available. So like we use when to meet. So that could be a resource for finding times that work for everybody.
And I see, Andrea, you raised your hand. Did you have a question or something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I did. Thanks for the conversation. We're actually hosting a youth listening session this evening, led and facilitated by young people in Wisconsin. So really excited for that. Yeah. So this is really timely. But what I'm curious about is what age group of folks do you usually have for the sessions that you hold? Because for ours, we've invited 13 to 26-year-olds, but that's a big age group. And like there's like a 13-year-old and a 26-year-old are also very different people. So I'm curious what the age group is that you've hosted and that you feel has worked really well for what you do.
So I know for our council, we're all freshmen, sophomore in college, and so that's worked really well. But for our youth-centered discussions, we limit it to 14 to 22. We feel like that is a good range because when, we feel like that's a good range just because you get too old and people are having different experiences, and you get too young and they're having different experiences. But the 14 to 22 gap, we've found that there is a lot of relatability among it, and that not only that, but they're having similar experiences. So we have found that that is a good age range for us.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you for asking. Kimberly, I see you raised your hand. Do you have a question or?
Yeah. I was wondering if you could say anything about if you guys had much training before facilitating these and what that was like. And you mentioned the facilitation guide, and I was wondering if that was something, just if you could say more about what that is and if that's something people can access.
And Viola can jump in too, but I know, like, for me personally, with my facilitation journey, this past year, we were really leaning towards like doing facilitation as a council. And so we had a month each where like we individually led meetings, like just with our council members. So it was kind of like low stakes, not as much pressure, just getting us into like how to write our own facilitation guide, how to lead a meeting. So like the first meeting was kind of us talking about what we wanted to discuss. And then our second meeting was us actually coming in and leading the meeting. And I feel like that was really beneficial for me personally, just because I was able to see how it's done and do it. And then as a council whole, when we first came on, we had various facilitation trainings, and we had orientation like during our monthly trainings. So I just think that like doing low stakes opportunities for them to kind of get used to presenting really helped me. And like with the facilitation guide, we had Nicole and Selena kind of help us walk through it. So like if we had questions, they could answer them, and like we did rough drafts, and then they would come help us edit it. So maybe just kind of easing them into it. I don't know if Viola has anything she would like to share on that.
Yeah, I can add, like, so within our council in general, we did have like facilitation trainings and the difference between facilitation, presenting, and just basic general information with that. But again, we all kind of came with our own experiences prior to the council. But in terms of the facilitation guide, it's a general outline of how you want your session to go. So in the first part of it, it's having like the ground rules and safe spaces and who's going to say what. So this is where you're going to outline the roles. And then we went into outlining the questions and the topics that we're going to ask and the transitions. So it's really just your session on paper, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Thank
No
you.
problem. Yeah, so if anyone else had any questions or wanted to share anything out.
Oh, I see where Alexandria asked, what is a good way to start or end a discussion, icebreaker debriefing activities with a large group of youth to help them stay focused and on track with the discussion event? Okay, or meeting. I would say, like, I know in our meetings for our council, we kind of start off with just like, hey, how are you doing? Oh, great. And so that way, like, we're kind of transitioning ourselves to be ready to talk. And then I know that in Youth Have Thoughts too, we did several icebreakers. So, like, what state are you from? If you could have a superpower, which one? Just because we found that students are more receptible and more prone to answer if they feel comfortable, and kind of opening up the floor at the very beginning is just perfect. And then stay focused. That's kind of why we use Menti. We've had a really positive experience with it. And with Menti, like, you're having to pay attention. Like, there are questions coming up on the screen and like you want to participate. You want to see what your response is on there. And so using Menti and chat and just kind of asking questions periodically, I think we've found really great responses through that.
Yeah, icebreakers, you can find a whole bunch online. They can just be really fun questions. Like, would you rather ride in a submarine or a spaceship? Like, just silly things just to get people kind of comfortable.
And our last question is, how could you become more involved? How could youth become more involved in their health center or school after a youth-centered discussion? And Maria, did you raise your hand? I think I saw it pop up and then it.
I did. Well, I didn't want to interrupt your question, so I can wait.
You can go ahead and ask it if you want, Maria. No pressure though.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. One of my questions was around the comfort level with youth in terms of sharing their camera or their background. I was curious, do any of you seem to have discomfort with that? And if so, how do you address that?
Sorry, I'm thinking.
So
Can I answer how we do it with Kaleidoscope?
yeah, go ahead. That's fine.
So Maria, we use let me turn on my camera. We use a platform called Discord, and it was originally a gaming platform. And I can send out a one-time link that is time sensitive for each individual youth. So even if somebody gets into their email, once they've used the link, they cannot use it again. And there's 3 ways to communicate on that platform. It's video, voice, and texting. So in the beginning of our meetings, I just ask the youth to turn on their cameras for, about 5 minutes so we can do a check-in. Because if we were meeting in person, we would be seeing each other and talking with each other. Plus, it gives me a chance to be able to kind of see them, for all of us to see each other and have that initial connection. And then after we do our check-ins, I say, you are more than free to turn off your camera or leave it on. Some youth keep it on during the entire meeting, and some youth choose to go right to the chat. I've had to learn how to type very fast now, but it's a really good platform. So really, it's just asking them initially if they're comfortable. But some youth might be homeless or living in a hotel. They might not be comfortable sharing where, their back environment, or it might not be safe for them to do that. So I think it really is the audience of youth that you're working with. But that's what I found has worked really well.
Thank you so much for sharing, Riley.
Yeah, thank you. I think within our sessions, we found that, like I mentioned in the presentation, the smaller groups, there was more of that comfort. So we found that they were more likely to have their cameras on, but we do encourage it. We never force it or we just say, hey, you can turn your cameras on if you'd like to, but you don't have to, just so there's that level of, again, comfort and safety.
And I would say like one thing we also do is the council members that are in the Youth Have Thoughts 2 sessions, we always start with our camera on, just because sometimes it's encouraging if other people have it on first, so you don't have to be the first one who's like, hello. So just having maybe like certain people join with their camera on already, kind of creating that safe space.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Does anyone else have any questions or things they would like to say? Oh, someone raised their hand. I can't see.
Oh, I think Louis.
Yes.
All right. My background is kind of funky, so I got to put my other hand. So it's like two hands holding. Yes. Thank you for this opportunity. And it's really exciting to see young people lead these things because my colleague and I work hours and hours with young people. So when we see this happening and this is national and everything, it's really exciting. That means that the future looks really bright. Question for you. How important it is to have a physical space for youth to gather, right? This is besides a meeting room in a center, in an organization, what about a place where youth actually just 90% of the people in there are youth and the 10% of the other people in the building are adults keeping the place, you know, uptight and clean and everything else?
I think that would be really interesting. I think that would be a really cool concept, and I think it would yield a lot of great responses from the youth because youth are more likely to share when they're surrounded by youth. I know like for our council, it hasn't inhibited us any because we're all online, and like with Youth Have Thoughts 2, it hasn't really either. But I think that would be awesome if you were able to do that with a bunch of youth in the room because you would be able to get so many different opinions and ideas and things like that.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think in person is great. Just looking at our convention during in person, it's just much more impactful than online. But of course, like they both have their drawbacks, but definitely in person, if possible, is really encouraged.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I see Rhonda raised her hand if you want to unmute and share.
Yeah, so your last question was how to keep the youth engaged after you did your big, gathering. So I am interested in some answers to that question. And my other question is when during COVID, we did our groups, we offered incentives for youth to show up, such as gift cards, because we were working off of a grant as well. So we had money, to send them gift cards. I wondered if that's something other people do. And of course, whenever we gather in person, we have food. That always brings them to the table. Really but I just wondered if, incentives were working for anyone else. And also, how do you, after the large gathering, you bring them back to sort of, do something like a civic engagement project?
So I know for the incentives for Be the Change, we offered raffles. And then we also, like for this week, we are giving away like a Polaroid camera, like kind of just using things that we like to encourage other youth to come and join. So I found that we had a positive result with incentives, but a lot of times also, like, I think that the students are really there and like the youth are really there to learn. Like they really are there to engage in conversation, and that's just like an added bonus.
Thank you.
Yeah. In terms of keeping them engaged, definitely social media again, just advertising your page, or if you have one, or just advertising some way to connect online as well so that they can stay updated on potential future events and also any information and education. That can also be a way for resources, like, hey, we have resources on social media, so follow us. But we also, in terms of incentives, advertise long-term opportunities and paid internships. And again, these are just also resources to learn more and stay educated, as that's what a lot of youth are looking for based on the responses that we gained.
Thank you.
Little follow-up question on incentives, right? Because when you're fighting for money and asking for money, always people want to see numbers and they want to see all these things that sometimes is really hard to get on paper and on statistics. How would you say that when you might not have incentives, but the experience and the, I guess, entertainment, if you want to call it, is part of the incentive, right? The food for sure, because if you want to hold a meeting, you want to keep them engaged and energized, but also the experience, right, of whatever you provide for them, whether it's education or whether it's information, and obviously resources in terms of leadership, building skills and things like that. Would you say youth really value that as an actual commodity, social capital, I would say, rather than, oh, here's a 20 gift card so you can go fill up your tank gas, or your parents?
I would say personally, I have gained more like through the experience I've had rather than like going to get a gift card. I know that like we had an opportunity and and a young student kind of told us that we should advertise by like great experience that will help you learn and grow. And so really putting it at the forefront that like this is what you're going to be learning once you come to this. Like it's going to be able to benefit you in various aspects. Kind of like what Viola talked about our personal experience with facilitation and leadership. And we were able to learn just by showing up and learning from other people who have done it. And so I would say that youth do gravitate towards experience if they know that they're going to gain something from it. So really just telling them like, you'll learn how to do this, this, and this if you come.
Right.
I don't know if you have something you want to share, Viola.
Yeah, just to add on that, like in the presentation, I mentioned like the benefits. So I would use like the benefits of your session as a way to advertise if like you don't want to use too many incentives, but also like resume building or just, hey, you can put this on your college application that you were a part of this. And a lot of times that's valued a lot more, maybe even a lot more than a gift card, because that has a long-term impact to say that you were a part of a conversation, you did some sort of advocacy work. So yeah, definitely the experience and the benefits that you gain, the non-tangible things, are definitely things to be advertised as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.